Coming up in this final episode of Chasing Adventure, the evidence of our recent storm was still hanging around with water all over the roads and the Rio Tinto railway access track. Mount Bruce Road, and to find out that it's closed. So we're going to have to backtrack a whole lot back through some of these nasty wet roads. Karijini is a very popular place for tourists in the Pilbara region. The park is filled with many hikes and walks that take you down into several deep, narrow gorges with flowing fresh water. The rain didn't stop following us. Our second day in Karijini, and it poured down for most of the day. We moved on to head south towards WA's highest peak, Mount Meharry. The roads again were waterlogged, and we made the most of the photo opportunity. Not only is Mount Meharry the official highest peak in WA, but it's also only accessible by four-wheel drive. The track provides an awesome ridgeline drive that has views I haven't seen anywhere else in WA. It wasn't long before we made it to the top, signed the book and enjoyed this magical landscape in the best light. It was a very early 4:30 AM and wake up for a few of us this morning. The views from the peak are already amazing, but add the right lighting and the images are just spectacular. Stay tuned for the last episode of Chasing Adventure. We've spent another night in Karratha. We've restocked and refueled and heading towards Karijini National Park. The evidence of our recent storm was still hanging around with water all over the roads and the Rio Tinto railway access track. Our first stop, Hammersley Gorge. Probably the most isolated attraction in the Karijini National Park, however this means it's generally the least busy too. Hammersley offers a large swimming hole with a small round pool and waterfall on the west side. Normally crystal clear water replaced by murky stormwater on our visit, but nonetheless a spectacular place to visit. It wasn't long before we were back in the four-wheel drives and heading to camp. As I mentioned in one of my previous episodes, everything is massive in the Pilbara, and this includes the trains. These iron ore trains are some of the largest in the world, often up to 2.5 kilometers long and as heavy as 35,000 tons. They really are a sight to see in person. This area holds the world record for the longest and heaviest train in history. In 2001, a BHP iron ore pulled a 7.3 kilometre long train, a total of 275 kilometres from Newman to Port Hedland, weighing in at a huge 99,730 tonnes. A hard statistic to grasp. So we've come the back way from the Hammersley Gorge down through to try and get into Karijini. We've come here to the Hammersley Mount Bruce Road to find out that it's closed. So we're just doing a bit of a few inquiries now to see whether that's still current information, if there's any updated information on the road condition. Otherwise, if it's not and it actually is still closed, we're going to have to backtrack through some of those nasty muddy roads and try and find another way in, maybe through Tom Price. But either way, time for a snack, time for a drink, and back on the road again. It turned out the roads were open and the sign on this western point hadn't been updated. So we continued on, and it wasn't long before the famous Karijini Ranges came into sight as we arrived at our camp. Karijini is a very popular place for tourists in the Pilbara region. The park is filled with many hikes and walks that take you down into several deep, narrow gorges with flowing fresh water. It was at this point of the trip that I took a little step back with the camera and just enjoyed the scenery around us. I'll put together a quick montage of the footage from a few of the gorges we visited, but make sure that Karijini is on your bucket list to see at some point when travelling through WA's Pilbara region. We thought we had seen the last of the rain for this trip, but we were wrong. On this day in Karijini, it poured down for the whole day. Given the nature of the hikes and climbs in the park, most of the tracks were closed off. To keep ourselves busy, we decided to drive into the nearby mining town of Tom Price to have a look around. Visiting the cafes, tourist centres and the pub for lunch, we also decided to make our way up Mount Nameless. Mount Nameless usually offers awesome views of Tom Price townsite on one side and a huge open cut mine on the other. However, given the weather, all we saw were just clouds. Nevertheless, the drive was still enjoyable. After a few days of exploring Karijini, we moved on to head south towards WA's highest peak, Mount Meharry. The roads and tracks leading into Mount Meharry were still very much waterlogged, but they were great fun. Not only is Mount Meharry the official highest peak in WA, but it's also only accessible by four-wheel drive. There are two main climbs into this drive which require some concentration. The first is relatively short and gives you a good indication of what is required, both in four-wheel drive capability and driver skill to make it to the top. Not overly difficult by any means, but careful wheel placement and controlled driving is required to avoid damage and successfully make it to the top. The second climb is much longer and it has a jump up in the middle. Again, fairly straightforward, but you can see a minor slip off the main line can still hold you up. Despite all of our vehicles choosing very different lines to get up and around the jump up, we all made it through successfully and unscathed. After the second climb has been conquered, the track provides an awesome ridgeline drive that has views I haven't seen anywhere else in WA. It wasn't long before we made it to the top, signed the book and enjoyed this magical landscape in the best light.
It is the official point.
The sun was dropping and so was the temperature. It was time to head back down, move the trailers to a suitable camp and call it a night. It was a very early 4:30 AM and wake up for a few of us this morning. We made it our plan to head to the peak for first light and sunrise. As freezing as it was on the peak, this view was 100% worth the early morning wake up and the rocky night drive to the top. The views from the peak are already amazing, but add the right lighting and the images are just spectacular. And that is it. As we make our way down Mount Meharry for the last time, it marks the end of our trip. We pack up and head to our last Pilbara campsite of the trip to finish off 3 weeks exploring in the Pilbara outback. There we have it. After almost 3 weeks on the road, we are back near Newman where we started, right back at the beginning, and another oasis in this rough, rugged landscape. This trip has had so much: wide open roads, some awesome campsites, great four-wheel drive tracks, dozens of river crossings, and we've also been fortunate enough to be present during some of the heavy rainfalls and being landlocked into some of those locations for some time. But seeing the way that this land adapts and accepts all of that water is something that is unseasonal for this time of year, but also something that a lot of people don't get to see. So we're very fortunate and lucky to be here during that time. But I hope you guys have enjoyed coming along with us on the journey, watching the places that we've gone to and how we've gone about doing them. And we'll be sure to see you on the next trip episode. Cheers. we drive into the heart of the Pilbara region of Western Australia. We check out some history along the way and cross more river crossings than we can count. We cook up some great meals, hike rugged gorges and find some of the best camping that Western Australia has to offer. We're going to head back out, go through those river crossings that we came in on. Had a whole lot of water come through the passenger side dash here down onto the footwell. We enter into some very remote country and find ourselves backtracking on some gnarly four-wheel drive tracks in the dark. Arriving at camp in night can be difficult, but it also means that it's harder to visualize the landscape around you. We picked a spot away from other campers and we hoped for the best, and this was what we woke up to.
I make no promises to the quality of the food at the end of this though. This is my first time.
Great camps, big fires, wet and windy weather and flat batteries. We're waking up this morning and what a contrast. We visit Australia's hottest town. So that's what happens when you come following me down some four-wheel drive tracks. The other guys followed me down too, and now we've got two more stuck cruisers. You changed gears there at the right or the wrong time.
I know, rookie error.
We find an oasis in the desert. We've made it down to Old Karratha station now, and we're actually at a location of an old World War II secret airbase. We're gonna go for a quick explore around and check out some of the old relics, the aircraft hangars and the runways and taxiways. This is the first a week on the road and we finally got Dad in the kitchen. I'm staying well away, but there's a lot of history out here. There's a lot of old building footings, some old relics. We are expecting a lot of rain to come in the next few days. The weather forecast is saying up to 60 mil tomorrow. It's going to close those roads off. We climb to new heights and set our sights on more amazing locations. The storms are approaching and the tracks are getting wet. We take the wrong way down a dry and rocky riverbed before discovering another awesome campsite. Here we found what has to be, again, one of the best campsites I've come across, particularly in this area. We have got some clouds rolling in and the rain is safe to fall. So it's currently 4:30 in the morning. This rain has been going non-stop all night. Nonetheless, I don't think it's going to be a good idea to stay here. So we've made it to this little patch of high ground here. What we can hear is a large gushing of water. So I reckon that river down there that we'll camp next to is now flowing in full force. So after the reconnaissance drive into 76 this morning, I think it's pretty clear that we're not going anywhere anytime soon, and I think we're starting to get a little bit over the novelty of being landlocked. There's just no way we're getting the cruisers and the trailers out of this area. We're forecasting that we should be able to drive out on Thursday, which is probably 2 days, but towels are soaked, our clothes are soaked, hats are soaked, hair's soaked, hands are wet. You just can't dry anything or keep anything dry.
Follow me, he said. We'll be right, he said.
So I think it's fair to say that my expedition to lead us to the waterfall behind that cliff there was a big failure. So we're going to hop back in the river, float down to where we started and try a different way. 2.5 hours of hiking, one failed expedition, but a whole lot of fun, and how awesome is this view? We're going to sit down, chill out and enjoy our surroundings. The skies are clear and the perfect Pilbara weather is back. So we've spent about 2.5 hours now walking 2.5 kilometre round trip through all the close river crossings that we have to cross, including the one that's just down the road from camp here, and it's just simply too deep to cross today. And we've all come to terms with the fact that we're staying here for another night. We're going to have to reassess in the morning, but I think it's likely that we're going to have to push through in the morning. So we're going to head down to the rapids, jump in for a bit of a swim, bit of a relax, a few beers. Okay, so it's finally time to cross the big river crossing that we need to get out of here after 5 days.
Ready? Go. You'll be right, you'll get through.
A little bit nervous. Here goes nothing.
I can hear it coming in.
no!
Well, after the first plunge, it was quite nerve-wracking. Floor, the river was firmer than I thought it was going to be.
We've still got a big crossing up ahead. 5 days later, we are finally out of the George River area and back onto something that resembles a road. Glad to be freed from a 500 square metre patch of mud and dirt. It's been one heck of a drive getting out of here. A few nervous moments, a little bit of water in the car, but the trip's not over yet. Time to head back to Karratha, regroup, restock, and move on to the next part. The evidence of our recent storm was still hanging around with water all over the roads and the Rio Tinto railway access track. Mount Bruce Road, and to find out that it's closed. So we're going to have to backtrack a whole lot back through some of these nasty wet roads. Karijini is a very popular place for tourists in the Pilbara region. The park is filled with many hikes and walks that take you down into several deep, narrow gorges with flowing fresh water. The rain didn't stop following us. Our second day in Karijini, and it poured down for most of the day. We moved on to head south towards WA's highest peak, Mount Meharry. The roads again were waterlogged, and we made the most of the photo opportunity. Not only is Mount Meharry the official highest peak in WA, but it's also only accessible by four-wheel drive. The track provides an awesome ridgeline drive that has views I haven't seen anywhere else in WA. It wasn't long before we made it to the top, signed the book and enjoyed this magical landscape in the best light. It was a very early 4:30 AM and wake up for a few of us this morning. The views from the peak are already amazing, but add the right lighting and the images are just spectacular.